Welcome to our second Heritage Language Roundtable. This event, especially our colleagues from community colleges. This event is organized by the LLRC and MIC, and it's supported by the UISFL grant. With this grant, after our first roundtable with this grant, we were able to create a new heritage language track for Korean, and we are also able to strengthen our existing Chinese and Spanish tracks. So we are very grateful to this. So during the discussion time, probably we hope to share some of the survey results from our students who were actually enrolled in those classes, so we can have a better understanding of their language use and background, and particularly their experiences in our courses. But before that, very happy to have Hae-Young Kim, Dr. Hae-Young Kim from Duke University today to share her insights, experiences, and expertise in heritage language education. So now I'm going to let Agnes introduce Hae-Young.
Thank you, Ji-won, for organizing this event. It is a true pleasure and honor for me to introduce Dr. Hae-Young Kim, who is a professor of the practice at Duke University, where she is also the chair of the Department of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies. Professor Kim and I met many years ago, so long that neither of us can remember. Due to our common interest in heritage languages, heritage language research, as well as education. Now, I have always been impressed by Professor Kim's very broad range of command of the issue of heritage language. She works on morphosyntax, language acquisition, and she pays attention to semantics, discourse details of language use, as well as very broad scopes in terms of heritage language maintenance at a societal level. I'll give you two examples. She is the author of a chapter called Korean Language in the US in the book Language Diversity in the USA, edited by Kim Potowski, who actually is coming to speak to us next month. And that chapter is a state-of-the-art review of the Korean language in the US, extremely informative, extremely well written. I had a lovely opportunity to have dinner with her on Thursday night when Professor Kim graciously gifted us the most recently published book, a special issue of the journal for Korean language education. This is a special issue of this thickness. This book, I cannot read all of it. Obviously, a lot of the materials are in Korean. I have to work on it beyond Chakku Hamnida. But the book is so impressive. It actually gives a very detailed, step-by-step, module by module, methodology by methodology account of curriculum that is presented at all levels for both heritage learners and foreign language learners of Korean in the US. And I think if all languages have a handbook like that, we will be in so much better shape than we are today. So I think, and Dr. Kim played a crucial role in the compilation of that special issue. So truly, it's a remarkable accomplishment. So here is a scholar and a practitioner who is an applied linguistic par excellence. Really, she's concerned with theoretical issues, structural matters, as well as curriculum development. So it is most fitting and proper, I think, for her to be addressing us on issues of not just a Korean heritage language education, but heritage language in general. So please join me in giving her a warm welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for such a generous introduction. I think that will raise the bar of the expectation of this talk too high. But I feel actually, because I met a lot of colleagues here yesterday during various meetings, and it was such an actually privilege and a pleasure to get to know about the project initiatives and curriculum on this campus, and such a devoted, such like an hardworking and well-informed colleagues, and then very kind and friendly and generous. So I'm going to rely on your kindness for like the what is it, the lack of any what is that, rigor in this presentation that will probably show itself. So I'm presenting it actually more as an actually prompt for you to think about the kind of curriculum you're developing involving heritage students. So so bear with me. And then also I think that I have actually, this is a really a special opportunity, because I know that actually I don't have to finish this like in 20 minutes or 45 minutes. So I can do the discussion later after the presentation, or I think that actually I can briefly stop once in a while if you have any questions, and we will continue. Does that sound okay? Right? Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So let me begin. Right. So this is an actually. I inserted this forward last night after talking to some of you, and so because heritage language learner or heritage student needs, and then as a very varied and diverse, but still somewhat like a unique and common profile, and so. Just like going back to the really basic things about heritage student needs, and some this is what scholars like have talked about for a long time, and so there isn't actually this that a lot of heritage, not all of them, but many heritage students have actually better receptive skills than productive skills. So that's the kind of actually development they have to kind of make to get to actually higher proficiency level in the heritage language. And also a majority of students have like an extensive experience in orality, but very limited experience and literacy in the language. Sorry, excuse me. And also because many of the I mean also quite a large number of heritage students. Language socialization happens at home, and then also in a very closely networked communities. So the registers that they get exposed to are kind of limited. So they think that that's all there is in the target language. So they tend to actually have a very limited awareness about register differences. So. So I think different languages have like actually kind of revealed that kind of actually lack of awareness in many different areas. But for the Korean example, like a lexical choices, for example, when I actually look at heritage student writing, and I kind of actually sometimes kind of like you don't say this in writing, right? So, for example, Korean has a lot of actually the lexical pairs, like, for example, very intensifier in oral language. You say 되게, But in the written language, you don't use that because it sounds a little too kind of like as you have a separate like a 몹시, 무척 or something like that. And also even the grammatical markers, prepositions have an actually oral kind of version and then also written version. Like for example, the preposition like with, like in the oral version, it would be like with a friend is like a 친구랑. But if it's a written version, you don't use that like a 친구와 or 친구와 같이. Yeah. And so there is the lexical choice differences. And also one of the most prominent features of Korean writing is the actually sentence ending. So there is actually different stylistic choices for sentence ending. So Korean, Japanese would be the other example. It's an agglutinative language. So you have to stack up a verb morphology towards the end of the sentence. And so it's not something you can avoid. You have to use something. And then heritage language learners are so used to the oral speeches style sentence ending, so it doesn't come up very fittingly in the written essays. And also this is actually the last part is the more recent kind of research development by scholars like Polinsky. It's an actually very different actually linguistic knowledge that heritage language learners tend to develop. So there are some what you call it, impoverished morphology and then also syntax. So it's very hard to catch. So because particularly proficient heritage speakers sound so fluent, and they actually perform the like a large portion of the communicative functions fine. So it's not kind of showing up well, but if you paid close attention, you see that actually, their past tense use is somewhat actually different from the what is called actually the monolingual speakers of the language, or the more proficient speakers of language. So they tend to have an actually divergent grammar, and that tend to actually what many people call fossilized pattern of the actually language knowledge. And so how to kind of actually shake them up and how to destabilize them so that they could actually use more target-like linguistic system is a kind of actually challenge, and also it could be the one way you can see the heritage language developments actually path to take. But this is very kind of actually linguistic kind of actually way of looking at heritage language student needs. But I was also thinking actually there's actually social-cultural aspect of the heritage language needs too, and this is the topic that came up a lot at the conversation at lunchtime yesterday, that how actually when you implemented a heritage language specific curriculum or syllabus, how they related so well to the topics that presented, that means actually identity issues, for example, that tend to be largely ignored in the general foreign language classroom, and so it's all about actually the complete novice going into a very different culture, and that's usually the way that the foreign language curriculum is set out. So the heritage language learners really do not relate to that kind of actually setup. So there's a specific actually heritage identity issues, and then it sometimes involves it's very complicated social political kind of actually context as well, and many heritage speakers are minorities in the mainstream society. So, and there are some racial issues, and there's so a lot of actually difficult situations sometimes they have to deal with, and also at the same time. They are also putting an actually very unrealistic demand that they should, if they learn heritage language, they should be like their parent or their grandparent or the native speakers of the language. They should be correctly master their language, and that's very like unrealistic and unfair. And so, because their life, their linguistic lives, their cultural lives actually. It's not just belonging to one category, one community, and so their affiliations and their how do you say identifications are really kind of actually dispersed in different ways. So, respect for their bicultural life and bicultural identity is also an important issue in dealing with the heritage language needs. So because of that, and then there's an actually growing, it has been a long kind of actually dream, and then a proposal that there should be separate heritage track, heritage language courses. And so I'm actually very glad to see that that's happening on this campus, particularly given that there is a really concentrated population of heritage learners in the area and also on campus as well. So I wish you like all the best, and I want to really learn from your experiments and then what you observe, and then hopefully that will be shared to other practitioners and researchers as well. But also there is some realistic constraints as well, and there is like funding issues, number of students, and things like that. But I mean, just so if there is no such actually reality we have to deal with, hypothetically, then how long do we want the heritage track, and then, at what point should we start, and what point we actually can really move, kind of actually continue without really thinking about this is a heritage specific thing. So whether it's an actually, is it like a third year, is it a fourth year, or is it a fifth year? It's very hard to tell, because one thing I learned yesterday is actually for Spanish heritage learners on this campus, there's a growing number of second and third generations. So they come with actually even lower proficiency to the Spanish language program, but they are not the same as actually absolute beginners, so they're different. On the other hand, the Chinese learners, there is actually more of students who migrated to the United States later in their childhood. So some of them has a good kind of foundation in terms of the actually basic language knowledge and skills, and some exposure to the formal variety, but very different, but very limited. So there are very different kind of actually combinations of, compositions of heritage students in different programs, and also different areas will face different kind of actually challenges. So it doesn't look like actually one like a level or one model will fit into like all different kind of actually situations. So I think what is required is a really flexible way of dealing with things, while we actually try to get the heritage track courses that is the most crucial courses in the curriculum, but at the same time kind of try to cope with different actually not necessarily idealistic and ideal configuration. So mixed classes are realities in many cases. Sorry, yeah. Here's the actually question I'd like to ask you. So if we do the actually heritage and non-heritage teach heritage and non-heritage students together in the same class, is it always really a problem, or are there advantages? Is it always an yeah, so I mean this might not be sometimes actually ideal kind of situation that you have heritage and non-heritage students in the same classroom, right? But just to flip it around, is there any advantages if we have those two students in the same, two different groups of students in the same class? Yeah, Eriko? Yeah.
The one thing we hear from students are like, oh, it's not fair to be graded in the same way. And then that gives a problem for the instructors.
Yeah.
However, some non-native speakers, they love to learn from heritage learners because they feel more privileged, and they can learn more authentic language more naturally than formal instruction.
Right.
So there are pros and cons.
Yeah. So what Eriko said, actually, heritage language learners themselves could be really good resources to non-heritage learners as a more fluent, proficient, and higher level actually users of the language, because in the classroom it's usually the teacher who is the source of actually input, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Native speakers help a lot in the class, but also they do a lot of problems because most learners speak have the problem that they never were corrected when they were growing up in the language. So if they're going to come to practice that in class, it doesn't work to the teacher correct those mistakes.
Yeah.
And to me, is both sides the same? It's the same balance. Progress and also misunderstandings.
Yeah. So yeah. So another so Eriko's point was actually the advantage that non-heritage students are getting from this configuration. But on the other hand, heritage learners themselves can benefit from this group makeup because there might be more actually focus on form that they may not get in other situations. So that's that could be an advantage. Anything else? Okay, so let's just get you started thinking about this, so if we have mixed classes and how to actually how to conduct the class and how to design the course syllabus materials to actually to fulfill the learning goals of sometimes disparate learning goals of the two groups, and that's actually very difficult challenge to face. So but I think actually in many cases this is a reality. I mean, we have both heritage and non-heritage students. So yeah.
Emotional,
right.
How the students feel inside the classroom. Sometimes non-natives might feel like they are deserted, and other people understand, but only they don't understand. They feel lonely and neglected.
Right.
That could be a case. And on the other hand, when the non-natives do very well in the exams and focus on form parts, heritage learners sometimes they feel a little offended, and then, so there's a kind of up and down.
Yeah.
At the beginning, heritage language learners may do well in speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and then when they realize that non-natives are better, they feel a little so very sensitive emotional parts are, and it's very difficult for instructors to handle these emotional parts of the students.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to be aware of that. Like actually, so in this case, actually both groups actually lose because non-heritage students feel that they are really left out because they don't quite get what is going on, and they feel that actually they are neglected. On the other hand, the heritage students feel like offended because they are supposed to be more proficient, but they don't necessarily get good test results because the way that the formal tests are constructed actually by design actually in favor of the more kind of actually form-focused, formalistic language knowledge, right? Yes. So, so then why are their feelings hurt, and then why are there actually what is that? Like a self-respect kind of actually shaken, and so understanding the cause of it actually may give some kind of way to solve the problem. But just actually give a quick actually answer to that. I mean, at my own university, the program is so small, and then our undergraduate population is such a small number. Having a heritage track would be an actually luxury I can actually never actually even have, because a very small program. So what I do in my own situation is actually to place the heritage learners in the kind of actually as much as possible comparable levels of the courses. And at the same time, as you go higher up, there are more and more heritage learners, and then lower level, there's more non-heritage learners. So, but still, so for a very long time, in my third-year class, there were only actually heritage learners for a long time. But then, the students who started actually from the first year kind of actually continued to the third year. So now this is actually a real challenge. And so these are students. So I'm going to show actually those are the students you're going to see in the data I'm going to share with you. But after a lot of actually lot of exploration of different ways of dealing with it, and I think actually because non-heritage learners are small in number, and I think they are the ones actually who somewhat actually suffer some disadvantage in this combination in this group. But what I ended up doing is actually I haven't actually in a way I have 2 tracks in the same class. So I have actually 2 different ways of grading them, and then also their assignments are slightly different. And also I have an additional like a speaking session for non-heritage learners, and then like the percentage of the test score, and then also the kind of assignment weight in their final grading is slightly different. So if you tell them right at the beginning, okay, so there are very different groups of students, and this is what I do. So, but they have the choice to sign up which track they would need more. Yeah, so I call it actually speaking practice track, and the other one is written practice track. So speaking practice track students should actually meet 1 hour and a half more just with them, and then I kind of actually concentrate on actually more of an oral practice. And then with the heritage learners, they have to hand in actually different kind of assignment. I mean, in my case, it was actually Chinese character self-practice worksheet or something like that. So because their vocabulary is actually really, vocabulary growth is really important. So, but still it's not perfect. But I think actually, so what I want to try to do is actually by creating some materials and tasks and activities that will engage both groups well enough, then they, I mean, so language acquisition is actually something that teachers cannot have an 100% control over anyway. So as far as they are engaged in a very meaningful use of the language, then they will continue to develop their own language system in the target language. So for that, particularly in upper level classes, and I think this is doable from actually a high intermediate level and then up to advanced level. So content-based instruction to engage students intellectually. And then, and also one important part of this actually, so both heritage learners and then non-heritage learners need writing practice, because non-heritage learners sometimes particularly taking higher level classes because they want to read and they want to write. So, and then heritage learners, this literary use of language, I mean not literally, literacy is what they actually need more practice in. So writing is a very important component, but just actually make the writing as a more of an actually social act rather than classroom practice. So that's the main two ideas that I want to actually share with you. And writing as social action, what I mean by that is that actually the instructor has to provide some social context for the writing. So this is actually the assignment you turn into to the instructor, and you get like a grade of it, and you fulfill the requirement. So by social context, meaning actually this writing is actually not only meant for the teacher. It's actually it's writing to be read by someone else. And then the easiest way of doing it is actually other classmates read it, right? But you can think of other ways of doing it too. So I try to actually create some kind of actually reader-writer community within the classroom by designing the assignment in such a way, and then also by doing it actually, it's not something, I mean, students will not be interested in reading each other's writing unless there's some meat in it. So this is actually, unless this is about actually finding more about the topic itself, and also, learning about this, my classmate. So what does she think about this? I wonder what his stance is on this issue, and things like that. So writing, making the writing as an actually opportunity for presentation of self, like a social and academic presentation of self. So I think that's an important actually feature to be considered to make the writing as a social action. And so I'm going to show you how these things were actually designed, and then I'll actually So this is actually well-meaning like a course design, but does it really work? And then I'm going to actually does it really work? So I'm going to examine that actually whether it really worked. Do you want the answer now? For that actually, writing as a social action is actually that. So the approach I'm taking is actually what is called actually beyond product approach and beyond the process approach. Like the product approach is actually that it's in the composition field of composition and teaching writing. The product approach was a main like a dominant framework for a long time, and it was replaced by the process approach. And so I mean each approach actually has something that we have to think about. And I mean ultimately we want students to actually produce some legible and good like a piece of writing, but by just focusing on the product itself doesn't necessarily lead to that actually desired outcome. And also process approach has been actually now main actually practice in the teaching writing. So it's not about you don't just give the students, okay, so this is a topic and this is what I like you to do. Like it has to include such and such components, and so I'm grading it. So that's not the way that it works. So the writing instruction should help the students throughout the writing process, starting with actually brainstorming ideas, planning and drafting, getting and using feedback and revising, and so writing conference and things like that. And this is a now standard practice in actually freshman English as well as actually ESL and any advanced level of writing teaching. So so even going beyond that, but still process writing, I mean depending on how you design it, but there is probably some lack of concern about actually why do students do the writing. And so giving the context to the student writer, as well as actually it's not actually process. We really want to focus on the growth of the student as a writer. That's actually more of a context person oriented approach. So in this framework, literacy is actually, you have to look at the more of an actually larger social context. Literacy is a socially embedded activity. It's not just actually some writing in a social vacuum. It's not that actually the piece of writing as some important piece of work students have to produce. Students produce something for some reason for to be read by some readers. So that's so looking at the literacy as socially embedded activity is very important. And in this actually and this social process, the students' sense of identity and their positioning, and then also their prior experience of actually literacy, either familiar or cultural orientations, play a crucial role in actually in the students' actually place in this actually socially embedded activity. And also, most importantly, so there was, for a long time, there was too much focus on actually the piece of writing or how the piece of writing is produced, but let's focus on the writer themselves. So it's the writer, not the writing, that we are trying to improve. So a lot of times actually the feedback to the writing is actually, oh, make this particular piece of writing look better. That's not the goal. It's actually, so this may be not a perfect piece, this may not be the most ideal piece, but after this experience, will students write better? Will students be more confident? Or will students feel more actually enthusiastic about engaging in this actually like act of writing? And so it's the writer who really want to improve. So that's the context person-oriented approach. So the implication of the context person approach in writing is that in the context of actually formal education, there has been too much like an emphasis on school genre. So it's an actually, so you have a series of things, argumentative writing, and then like this paragraph structure, and all this actually register that is formally fitting to the high academic standard. But students actually engage in a lot of different actually very meaningful, socially important writing practices that are not actually, that do not share the same norm. So it's very important to recognize that and also to embrace those actually writing practices as a part of the actually writing instruction. And so for example, like a writing text message or writing actually a very short piece of blog on the website and things like that is an actually might have an actually more impact on their life than writing an actually well-constructed academic essay. Yeah, and that's what they probably might write. So so it's important, but we also want to actually them to be more proficient in that actually educational genres as well, because for their future kind of actually educational opportunities. But this so there should be a respect for this actually non-school genre of writing as a practice, and then also as an actually bridge between the actually student current experience with the school-based genre to the like a more desirable expertise in school-based genre. Yeah. And then also, the writing, in designing the writing, there should be more focus on social, interpersonal, and the personal function of the writing, and that's the considerations that should be factored into in designing this kind of writing based on this approach. So, so what I'm going to present is a case study of mixed third-year classes. But there are two overriding questions. The first one is actually how can writing, so film commentary is an actually very standard writing task. And I think you do that a lot. And but how that actually very common kind of form of writing be made to align itself well with this actually the approach that I just actually presented. And then so this is just that one particular writing kind of task. The other things can be also designed in a way this way too. And then my question is that. Whether these assignments actually have a positive impact on the students' literacy and language development, and that's my main questions. Yeah. So and also I'm going to present actually both heritage and non-heritage language learners' development in while they're taking this class. So this is what I designed for the third year Korean class at my own institution. So this is very content-based class. I don't have any actually formal like grammatical or rules or usages as a part of the actually syllabus. It's entirely content-based, and so the test doesn't really focus on any grammatical part, but vocabulary a lot, yeah. And also there are like actually projects will be graded. In the first semester of the third year class, so there are two main topics. So right now actually I'm going, actually the current instructor who is teaching this class is actually, I'm working with her to make it actually three theme actually. So two themes seems to be actually, one each is too long for the semester, but then still it was actually a lot of actually busy work with the two themes. So we're going to take out some of the text from the first one and then insert another theme. So the first one is actually about pansori stories. I don't know whether you are aware of pansori in Korean literature. This is actually largely orally transmitted classical stories that has been told over and over again, and then actually in a kind of actually single person storytelling performance context. But there are also a lot of written versions of that as well, and these are really classical stories that every Korean knows about. This is a story they hear like from the childhood on. And then, for example, Chun-Hyang's story is it's a Korean version of like a Romeo and Juliet, if you can say. It's a star-crossed love story because of the class difference between the woman and the guy, and this is made into like tens of films. Every like a major filmmaker actually wants to deal with it, and also very first actually modern Korean movie making is actually concerned about that actually Chun-Hyang's story, and so and the next one is actually Heung-Bu's story is relatively simpler in terms of actually narrative structure and then also the character development and things like that, but this is also very, very well-known story, and I put it actually, I kind of actually played around a lot in the order, but I put it in the second because it's based in an actually old Korean rural village, so a lot of vocabulary is now so archaic, and so it's a lot of actually agricultural like terms and things like that. Although this isn't about actually a story of morality, about actually greed and then also compassion, and so how those things actually values played out in the story of these two brothers. Yeah. So students actually read so there are many different written versions of this story, and then I use actually the very simple but very but that has a lot of actually details in it, written by a famous Korean writer. I think he did it to make money. Lee Chung-jun is a very major writer, a contemporary writer. But so this is written for children, like a age 10 to like a 13 or something like that, and so it's a small book. And after students read these two books, they feel so accomplished because they finished 2 books, right? But with that, so we do a lot of actually. So there is actually reading assignments, and we do a class discussion based on that thing. And but in their own time, they watch films actually that are based on this story. So Chun-Hyang is a very good source, but Heung-Bu is not really is not made into that many movies much. So there is actually I think about like 30 some films are made about Chun-Hyang, but these are very classical and very critically acclaimed actually filmic versions. So Song Chun-Hyang in 1961, and as you can imagine, when it was made in 1961, it's very different from when it was made by actually almost the year 2000, and it's an actually very well-known contemporary film director, filmmaker. And so, then also you can see that actually this is such an actually core grammar. I mean, like a cultural. It's almost like a core cultural grammar in the Korean like actually culture. So the different kind of renditions of this story is actually planted in the soap opera and TV dramas as well. And so I was able to find actually one TV drama series that actually has the Chunyang as a title in itself. So this is like a modern story of Chunyang, right? So I asked the students actually to watch this and then write a commentary on it. And then in the second half of the course, this actually the theme was actually cultural history of Korean food. So starting with actually traditional food and based on actually different regional like regional kind of characteristics, regional kind of specialties, and then move on to like a introduction of actually what is called Western food into Korean cuisine, Korean like eating habits, and then how they actually evolve into some hybrid, actually very popular food as well. And I learned from students a lot actually. When I first actually started designing this material, imagine what, it was all based on actually traditional Korean food, right? But when I give the actually student actually writing project and they find it interesting actually topics themselves, so they actually write about actually Korean junk foods like ramen noodles, and then like and then also like a street kind of food and things like that. And that brings a like really interesting actually topics that students are actually genuinely interested, and also there are a lot of actually good potential for the exploiting actually the social and then the cultural history, because eating ramen has a lot of different layers of actually historical development. It has to do with actually industrialization and low wage in the urban setting. So that's the only like a food source for the like actually low wage like factory workers and things like that. So they also now assigned actually, I assigned them some films that are related to actually food-related films, and it was very, very difficult actually to find actually good films that has actually potential of some like a discussion and different interpretations. And I was still actually. There are some actually fail. This is the two movies I had in the particular year, but every year I have actually trial and error, and sometimes something didn't work out that well. Yeah. So that was the first semester of the third year Korean, and then a second semester of third year. This is a very actually heavy duty contemporary issues, very controversial issues. But these are the actually it deals with actually the overall it's an issue of actually justice, social justice and injustice. And this is what actually a lot of contemporary Koreans I feel actually very strongly about on the either side of the topic, and they are really riled up, and they feel either very wronged or they feel that this is a really right way of doing things, and this is actually the way that Korean society is actually made on like leaps and bounds of economic development and things like that. So the first one is about so this is on housing and urban development, and so there is a urban redevelopment is actually ongoing actually kind of like social issues in the contemporary Korean, and as in many other actually places in growing Asian cities, and also some of actually urban centers in the United States as well. So some gentrification is one form of it, but it's slightly different at the time that it was this kind of presented here. And also Korea is becoming an actually more multi-ethnic and racially, culturally diverse society, but in contrast to actually long-held belief that Korean is a very it's a pure blood nation, and that's what actually Korean used to say. So one race, and we all share the same tradition. We are all from the same like a racial or ethnic origin, and that's an actually. But it's really fastly changing, and it presents a lot of actually new challenges to Korean society. And then also education system is actually the hellish South Korean society with the highest rate of actually suicide and all these things, and how that is actually plays out. Actually, why is it performed actually practice like that. So that's education system, and then also I'm not doing actually military conscription any longer because the 4 heavy topics was actually too much actually. So I cut it down to 3 actually by now. And so as you can imagine actually when we have to actually discuss these things, and I cannot write actually my own text about this, and there's no learner text, so it's all actually from authentic sources, actually sometimes blog writing, and sometimes actually excerpts from the book, and newspaper articles, and a lot of actually preparation for actually glossary, and then also comprehension guide and things like that. But students actually get really, because it's such an actually gripping social issues, they get really interested. And then so related to that, there are actually, it's much easier to find the films related to it because it's actually in the conscious level of most of the Koreans, these issues. So some of them are documentary films, some of them are actually blockbuster films that kind of actually have an underlying kind of like a theme, although they are not on the surface. That's actually the main source of the conflict is because of this particular issue. So these are the films that I selected to discuss so for the student to write about. So writing assignments. So as you can see, so I numbered actually. So over the entire year, if the students actually continued from the first semester to the second one, they ended up writing actually 11 film commentaries. So in the first semester, it was actually about 6. So they write 6. So it's almost like so it's a 15-week semester. So every 2 or 3 weeks, they write 1 film commentary. And so there was 11 in altogether in the academic year. So what they have to do is actually they post the film commentaries on Sakai, is the class website. At that time, it was actually Blackboard, so the form looks so slightly different. And so they're asked to actually. So I sometimes I give some prompts. But basically it's an open-ended commentary, and I don't give them actually any length requirement. So as far as it's actually kind of actually somewhat make your point, that's okay. And then it could be 2 paragraphs, it could be 3 paragraphs, but don't make it too long. And so there's no length requirement, but it's more like actually generally I write the prompt so that students actually pay attention to the particular thematic aspect of the film, and then the way the film presents it and things like that. And so. But if the students have to watch this film without the readings, they would get it wrong because they wouldn't have actually enough understanding, knowledge about the cultural context and then the significance of issues. So generally, this builds on the reading, the discussion we had about the reading, and also they in writing this, they are responding to the content of this cinematic text on that particular topic, and also they are highly encouraged. So you don't have to summarize the plot, and so I'm really encouraging them to write about their reaction, their views, and their opinions about the film, or opinions about the issue itself. And then and also by posting that on the website, instead of just handing in the film commentary to me, the main purpose is actually their classmates would read it too. And so by doing that, and also but I mean, naturally, I would think that actually, they would be interested in reading each other's. They aren't. They're too busy. So actually, when I said it, so first, did you read others? No. It's only actually who are extremely motivated students read other students' comment. So you have to build something in so that they will read each other. Otherwise, actually, they just post it, and then they just yeah. So the intention is not really realized. So what I do is actually I require peer response. But but it's an actually, it could be a very sensitive thing, so I kind of actually gradually move to the full length peer response. So first time is actually just make sure that they read each other. So it's a classroom, so I give them assignment actually. They don't leave the response, but they have to read, they have to go and look at others actually responses. So I give them some kind of actually this, the chart, and so said actually, also what is the main actually point of this, your classmates actually comment, and so they have to summarize it. And then what do you think of his or her opinion? So there were 18 students, they cannot do the 18, so okay, so go and read at least 3 or 4 of your peers' commentary, and then they have to do this actually, summarizing and then commenting, just so, as an exercise to turn to me. And so if they have to do this to get a full credit for the commentary test, right? Sometimes you have to build in this kind of actually structure. Yeah. And then gradually you kind of actually for a little while I actually asked them actually, so everyone posts, and then by actually the end of the week they have to go and write something brief actually to small length, short length responses to each other. So there's a thread that you can do that. But then towards the end, what I do is actually I staggered their responses. So students actually can opt in early response or late response. So they go to early response and they post it, and then the late responders actually have to respond not only to the film but also to the others' comments. So such and such say view this film in this way. I agree, or I think that part is particularly important, or say, no, my viewpoint is slightly different, or something like that. And then you kind of change that kind of order around. So but when they do that, and towards the end, it's like a full length kind of like a response. So that's actually their main film commentary. Feedback is the most difficult part of teaching writing. I still don't know how to effectively give feedback to student writing, but this is the version I arrived at the time. So because in addition to this film commentary, actually, students have actually 2 other major actually writing assignments. So there's something related to midterm. There's actually final, actually, a very full-length essay. So they don't actually revise it, or they don't revise and resubmit it. This isn't actually just a one-time thing. So what I do is actually I grade each film commentary, and then mostly on the content development, and that's the focus of my grading. And then I give them actually some feedback about the language. So after a lot of actually trial and error, what I focus on now is actually spelling, and then also some major lexical and then grammatical errors. So spelling, as you said, actually blue highlight, I don't give their answer, so that they know that actually this is something you have to go and fix. But for the grammatical and the lexical errors, I use a comment function in the Word. So as you can imagine, so this first one is actually non-heritage writers piece, and this second one is heritage writers piece. So heritage writers tend to have more spelling mistakes, as you can, and that must be actually your experience. I mean, depending on the language you teach. Maybe this is more of an issue in Korean, because Korean spelling is not phonetic, it's actually morphophonemic, so it's very, very hard, because students actually, heritage students tend to write actually as they hear, but the spelling is not organized that way. There's actually very like a deep-rooted misunderstanding about Korean orthography. It's not phonetic, it's phonemic and morphophonemic, so it's organized that way. Yeah. And I think it's the language like a Chinese or Japanese has even more complications in orthography as well. So this is what happened actually for the so that's the first part. And so any questions until so far? Yeah.
I have one about just the mechanics of the assignments that
Yeah.
you gave, I saw that the directions for Blackboard were written in English. Do you give them in English to
Yes.
the students? Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I give them in English, yeah. About the writing prompts. So this is what I like you to write about, yeah. Yeah.
A question about grading. How do you grade student blocks? I mean, is it not subjective, or do you provide a rubric or something? Because, you know, it's hard to grade writing by itself, but a staggered commentary, how do you do that? That must be very difficult.
Staggered commentary?
Well, the field commentaries,
Yeah.
students' response. How
Yeah.
do you grade response? Because, you know, we tell the students all your responses are valid as long as you support yourself. So how do you compare one to the other? Do you have a rubric that the students follow, you know, for your grading? I mean, what's your system?
So I tell the students actually this is an actually is there something actually some really kind of actually insightful observation about the film? Is it actually more than descriptive? Is that there's like some more analytical like content in it, and how the content is developed? That's the main actually criteria of the writing, and yeah, it's subjective, yeah. But so that's for this film commentary. That's the main criteria that I use, yeah, for the yeah.
Is grammar part of your?
No.
No.
Yeah, I make sure that actually don't worry about that actually accuracy of the language. I mean, but they actually they improve on it. So you can build it in the actually grading system if this is your wish. Yeah, but as far as actually what your criteria are is made clear to the student, and then I think that you have to. Yeah, there's actually, because of the writing, I mean, like any piece of actually project that is like an holistic, it's an yeah, I mean, that's a really difficult part, and I'm still like actually struggling, but so make sure that actually students understand what I do, and they accept my grading. Yeah.
How is the possibility of improvement built in?
Yeah.
This kind of assignment?
I think actually what I imagine is actually, so that's what you're gonna see actually. So students actually learn a lot from each other. Yeah. And that's the actually part of actually, because so a mixed ability group has a lot of actually interesting function. Yeah. So I mean, I will show you in a bit, but some of the expressions they actually started using towards the end of the semester. I never taught that actually. This is the way of you actually saying, making an evaluation. No, they pick up from each other. Yeah. Right. So it's actually just not actually writing your own, but looking at a lot of other people's writing, actually. And then I think actually sometimes they struggle to how to put this. And then you look at actually some peer saying, oh, this is how it is done. And I think that seems like there is a lot of actually moments of actually learning happening, reading others' film commentary as well. Yeah.
I really like the kind of interjunctive processing of text you're using, especially between the visuals and the textual.
Yeah.
And I think the students have to watch films without English subtitles, right?
No, I think I encourage them to watch it with the English subtitle, because their proficiency wouldn't be actually high enough to understand all the fine details of the film without the subtitle. And also, if I say that actually don't watch it with subtitles, there is no way that I can enforce it either, right? Yeah, but I think actually, I mean, in real life, like students will have to use a lot of different resources actually to respond to watch and appreciate, and then to really enjoy the film. I mean, if the subtitle is available, I actually, for example, I sometimes actually when I watch actually films like Korean films, English subtitle is very interesting actually, and for the purpose of actually for my own English and then Korean kind of actually comparison. And also, I mean, when I actually watch actually, for example, English actual films or English dramas, I turn on subtitle. Yeah. I don't do the actually listening practice. So I use all the sources, all the results that are available to have the actually full understanding and then all the details that I want to actually catch, for example. So students, so without English subtitle, their understanding of the film will be very limited. So if they hear something actually, so there'll be actually the Korean soundtrack, and then also English subtitle will actually reinforce each other for their understanding of the film. That's how I see it. Yeah. Yeah.
If you have a wide range of students from different levels,
Yeah.
even if they are all placed in the same class, same level, some students might feel that they're not really ready to share their product with the other students.
Yeah, right.
How do you deal with that?
That's a very good point. But I have all these students. I never actually had any students actually having that kind of concern.
Would they ever ask, I'm embarrassed to do this, so can I like write in English? 'Cause
Right,
I can
yeah.
express.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good thing. So one thing that you could do is actually, because they feel that actually I cannot really fully express myself in this limited language, and that so then I think that actually so far I didn't have that. I didn't hear the students' concern like that. But if that's the case, and I think the one good way is actually so write it in English. I write it in Korean. But then if you feel that actually your views are not fully expressed, then add some like a note in English. That's a possibility too. Yeah, right.
I also have a question from my own experience teaching heritage students.
Yeah.
They sometimes they have very explicit goals of improving literacy skills. They want to be corrected, and they tell me that's why they're taking this advanced level class. So how do we address that in the context of your design?
I think one thing you could do is actually you can have it's a separate session actually working on that. Yeah, if that's what they really want to improve on. But my experience is actually students say that, but then when I have actually corrected that much, it's actually this just overwhelm all other concerns. Yeah. So maybe it's actually you have some separate tutorial session, or you can assign a teaching assistant to kind of take care of that. But the spelling or the orthographic issues are just really vast and expansive, and so students actually are at very different places. Yeah, to be dealing with, as a whole class level. Yeah. But absolutely, yeah.
What do you focus in class?
So in class, it's mostly actually about reading. Yeah. So reading is very, very challenging. So what I do is actually there is an weekly reading assignment, and they have to turn in they have to respond to the reading comprehension kind of signpost questions, and they do that, and then I prepare different set of questions to check their comprehension, and then we move on to the discussion about the content. So yeah, most of the time is in class time is devoted to reading discussion. Yeah.
So Hae-Young pointed out that we want to use this in the elementary level, but not fully to cover all the contents, not necessarily, but we want to adapt the approach to our, that would be great if we could do it, but it's just that our elementary courses is so geared toward covering all the basic structural components of the language that it's really hard to cover all of this in class.
Yeah, we have to be more creative about the methodologies. If we buy some of the immersive sort of approaches in the elementary level, even though we are not in an immersive environment here, bringing that kind of cultural components to the instruction, I think definitely we can do that. I see some of the signs that are actually, the result of that kind of approach. I don't know how systematically I can just take my components.
It's very challenging to
regular
think like
But this is for 300 level.
Yeah. So it's the problem with kind kind of adopting. In the full length in the elementary school, students do not have the language to be able to discuss the content yet. So whereas third year students, somewhat, it's still they're very frustrating actually to be able to express their opinions and then to go to the actually some fine details of the content. We do a lot of actually content based in the second year as well, but then it's very difficult to get into an actually in-depth discussion at that level. But still, still dealing with some cultural content. Yeah.
So maybe we don't have to use the full length of the
Right.
film or documentary,
Yeah.
but if we could identify a small segment
Right.
of films or dramas that can highlight the values that Korean people share, I think that's a very good start point
Yeah.
of teaching them what and how Korean people actually think and use the language. But it's a lot of work for the instructor to do.
Yeah. It's time-consuming process to actually to locate the appropriate materials and then also package them into usable material in the, for the classroom. Yeah.
The instructor provides feedback on grammar, spelling, and vocabulary with a yellow highlighter.
Yeah. Right.
Do they give comments on the content of what was written?
Yes. Yeah.
Do they give
Yeah. So what you see here is actually I've given away. So this is actually So in English, so this is actually there is an actually content, response, coherence and cohesion, and then sentence and vocabulary. This is how I generally do it. Yeah. No, this is actually I do actually check plus, check minus, and things like that. That's yeah.
How do you quantify? How do you quantify the check plus or check minus? Is there any number that you actually use when you calculate them?
Yeah, I calculated actually. So there is a.
Is it on a scale of 1 through 5 or 1 through 3?
So this is actually these students got with the 3 checks. They're actually 94%. Yeah, I have a way of actually giving the numbers. Yeah, with yeah. So if you give that this way, then if actually students actually are much more willing to accept if you give them rubric. Yeah.
I don't like to work a lot with my computer because that's what we do every day. So I let them print out or write handwriting and then I correct them on paper. But I like that idea because you can have the record.
Right.
Because I sometimes have to
Yeah.
ask I have to scan them to have the record.
Right.
And that's a lot too. But
Right.
that I like.
Yeah.
And I don't actually give the correct answers either. I just label them with SP or spelling error. So we have a system to do it. But with the colors, it's so visual. The students will feel their improvement over time. That when they check all 11 pieces of writing, oh, I see less blues now or less yellows.
Yeah.
So based on that kind of improvement, I think we can also give incentives to the students. Like I see a lot of improvement and you also see that, so I will give you extra credit or whatever.
But sometimes actually you can do that. But when sometimes there are so many spelling mistakes, you don't do them all. You only do the actually really prominent ones. So later they're more finely tuned. Then you can still find a similar number of the spelling mistakes. So yeah, but that's one way of doing it too. Yeah, right. So this wasn't actually, I was really glad to be able to figure it out, at least spelling part, because that was actually, this is actually how research helped actually the classroom practice, because a few years ago at AATK conference, there was one presentation about actually the effectiveness of actually, the formal feedback, there are 3 or 4 options. You just actually indicate there is an error. And then the second portion is actually you indicate there's an error and what kind of error. And the third one is actually you indicate an error and then give the correction, right? So which one is more actually effective? But these researchers, two of them actually working together, find out that actually for grammatical and lexical errors, students cannot find the actually answers. I mean, obviously, if you say like, oh, there's a lexical error, what can they do? That's all they can manage, right? So that's not helping actually to find the actually right way of putting it. So some of them, but spelling, they find that actually if you tell them there's a spelling mistake, they can fix it on their own. Yeah.
There's no.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's no spell check for Korean.
We have to make sure that they turn it off.
Yeah.
You cannot use it. Of course.
I don't use a spell check myself actually in the Korean. Yeah.
In teaching writing, when I taught ESL writing, we use the portfolio approach where
Yeah.
you ask students to do multiple drafts, and the first draft you just address the content, and the second time, organization or a little mechanics, and the third one is just peer editing, that sort of thing. So I wonder if you give your students multiple chances to make corrections.
Not for this film journal because it's so frequent, and so there's a next one coming up. But we do. I do that actually for the final essay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So something that's
Right. Yeah.
important.
No, I would like to add that in our course in 300 level that we have native speakers and non-native speakers, so it's exactly, it's more or less the same problem. With a native speaker, we have a lot problem with spelling. This is the big problem. And we do something like that, is everything is in the computer and we work with 3 different moments. One is the draft, and this is the 15%. The second one now is 25 point more, and finally is the final essay. But in the first one, what we have a topic, we explain to the student what they need to do, and after the first draft, what we don't say this is the mistake. One is no mistake, it's error. No, it's in the process. So they need to go to the writing center in Spanish. So they need to spend at least 20 minutes, and they need to work. Where is the problem? And this is the only way that we are able to know to do something different. At the end, the student can see the 3 different drafts, and after they can go from the first essay, which we start with something like just description. The second one, they need to do something like a narrative. So we try to use different kind of also grammar, no? And the third one is when they start with express something about some specific problem. And at the end is the expositive text. So this is the only way that we work. But I was thinking what to say about what happened in Spanish 111 or any course that is elementary. So we start just with 20 words, but you need to write a paragraph, no like sentences. And it's little by little, but it's a lot work for the instructor. But we use exactly the same system, so everyone need to get one folder, and each one for 25 students, and after for how many times. So it's a lot work for the instructor. But at the end, it's wonderful when we have our meeting, and everyone need to see the midterm or the finals, and everyone shows to know what each one in one class, what happened, and everyone shows, this is my class, look at that. And so it's when you say, I work a lot, but there are something here. So this is the only way, but I think it's most, the work of us like instructor. And the rubric is so important.
Right.
It's like you using the check. So we have something, this is, check class, we don't use check. We say, excellent, very good, good, yeah, so we have the rubric that we can share with you, and at the end we say something like, we need some improve. But we cannot, and it's 0, but we say 2.5, so it's just motivation.
Right.
So we try.
Yeah.
So we try, but this is exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this evaluation is a really, really important issue and a concern. But as we actually start, I mean, this is something we have to really figure out, and we have to actually present students something that they can understand and they accept. And but at the same time, because as we go into the discussion a lot on this issue, now our focus is shifted to the product approach. So it's actually this tend to actually override other concerns. So it's pulling back from product to actually. So this is something we have to do, and students have to actually work with us as well. But at the same time, the main actually goal of the person and context-oriented approach is actually students actually. How do we make students? How do we help students actually want to write and enjoy the process of writing, and then more actually voluntarily take time to write something up. So, oh, this is really interesting. I want write something good, and so that kind of actually enhancing that experience is actually the main actually the focus that we really want to pay attention to. So that was the goal of it. So that students, but that was the goal. But whether really that's what happened, the way that student perceived. I didn't do any student actually survey, and I think actually a lot of times actually the pedagogic effectiveness of some pedagogical intervention or strategy is actually tested or confirmed by student survey, but that's actually, I think there's very little information, and I think actually more like an comprehensive, like an examination of other parts of the process, and also the product itself could be very insightful too. So the way that I actually checked actually whether students actually really enjoy this process, were they really motivated and really engaged in this actually film commentary writing? Did they just do it because it's a course requirement, or did they really like doing it? And I wanted them to like doing it, and it's some meaningful practice and experience. So that was the first question, and the second question is actually, but we are doing it because we want them actually to be actually more to be more proficient in the language. So if this, whether this writing is actually helps them to develop their linguistic proficiency better or not, and there was the otherwise, and then this is a language class, what are we doing, right? Yeah. And then thirdly, also we want them to be an actually better writer too, yeah, because that's a really important part actually as a language, the user of the language, and then as any student want to actually claim using the language for some real purpose. So the data comes from these two classes. So in the first semester I had 18 students, and a majority were non-heritage, 14 non-heritage students and 4 heritage, 14 heritage students and 4 non-heritage students. And then in the second semester, there were 14. And so, but there are a lot of new students actually. So these are not really the same students. So out of this group, only 5 are continuing actually. So 5 continued from the 305 to 306. So out of those 5, 3 were non-heritage students and 2 were heritage. These non-heritage students I had in this class were actually remarkable students. I mean, the fact that they came actually to the third year level, starting from the beginning level, was actually quite an accomplishment. And one of them was an MA student who actually studied from the intermediate level and who had actually quite a bit of an experience of learning it in some other institutions. He was a very mature student, and the other 2 were undergraduate who were doing actually minor in Korean. So to do the minor, they had to actually take on up to the third year level. That's why I did the actually courses. And so, as I told you before, in the first semester they wrote 6 film commentaries, and then second, 5 film commentaries. So for the first part, first question, whether they were really motivated, whether they were really engaged, I kind of actually somewhat like an hybrid measure. So I have a quantitative measure that was actually length of writing. That since it's very simple, right? So the length of writing, but that's very actually, I thought that was very interesting. And also the second measure is more of an actually kind of ad hoc qualitative analysis actually, that what kind of actually views they present in their writing. It's a very rough, like analysis of their writing. And then I'll go to further about actually the measures of language development, and as well as actually assessment of writing development. So for the first part, whether they were really motivated and engaged, and so I counted actually the length of text. And how do you count the length of text in English? Like a number of words, right? Yeah. But in Korean, actually, number of words is very difficult to measure because actually morphemes are combined into one word. So what I did is actually, and then also counting morpheme by morpheme is an actually very, very tedious process. So I just actually counted the syllables. So that's an actually good indication of the length. So as you can see, students actually, this is a mean length, so 432 syllables, and then the first time and second time it's a little lower. I think the first time I don't know why whether this is significant or not. But if you look at actually this is the error margin, so it's not that significant, but it goes up, and then by the first time it was actually noticeably higher. So they wrote actually longer and longer, and writing long piece is not actually insignificant because they really developed the ideas actually, and they were really spending more time. And I think actually when they read other students writing, they feel actually that, oh well, I have to do more, and so there's actually that kind of actually the peer influence as well. So they were writing getting longer and longer, but the last time it was actually dropped is the finals period, so they were under a lot of actually pressure, time pressure. And it's same with actually the second semester too. So it was really going up, but also there's a possibility that actually the particular film has more actually in terms of content, it requires more actually engaged response. So that's a possibility, but I cannot check it, so I don't. Yeah, because so generally it shows that actually students are doing more and more work, and then also and I never heard the students actually complaining about this is too much work. Yeah, and also they really expressed really a wide range of views. So they were really kind of actually on the, for example, this came more of an actually very like a polarized response to this TV drama. So this is the modern contemporary like adaptation of the classic story. So there was actually, wow, this is actually, I see parallel, and so you can translate that into the modern situation. The kind of, that's cool kind of actually response. I mean, this is a very simplified version of it. From there, and then and some students are very kind of actually very upset. Like actually, oh wow, so you made this classic story into such an actually typical pattern of like a melodrama and like the unrealistic plot structure, and so there was a really interesting actually divide in the responses, and then they were they were ranged from like a very favorite appraisal to the like a very critical observation about the way that this classic is adapted to the modern situation, and they were really actively engaged in the expressing their views. This is an excerpt. This is not the whole length of their response. And also, one thing that was interesting is actually so expressing views, like they're arguing about their opinions, and then also one interesting actually functions that emerged is actually their way of actually alignment with other peers. So agreements. So there were particularly it comes up because they have to actually post their response to the classmates posting, and the students actually express an actually agreement that I agree with. So this one says actually I agree with this student E. this drama starts a story just like any other drama, and the main character goes through the same goes through the hardship, although it's not the same as the classical story, but she accepts the pain because of the man, and like that student said, this really shows the difficulty of actually modern love or something like that. So it's an actually very engaged actually conversation, and while they are kind of actually threading their own response to the others. What is more interesting is actually when they actually disagree, and so they actually in class, I never said actually this is the way, it's actually discourse strategy to agree or disagree. I mean, this is something that I didn't go into explicitly at all, but the way they did it actually is actually, wow! They learned it so nicely. So it's like a so when they disagree, it's actually that they rephrase the other students' actually point of view, and so then there was an actually and summarize it, and there's some validation of that point. But, and then it goes actually that how that person actually, these students goes into different way of thinking about that. Yeah. And then, and also there's a lot of instance about actually acknowledging others' contributions to that discussion as well. So, originally I thought in this way, but now that I read what such and such wrote about this, I see the point. That's a very kind of actually poignant observation. And so you see that actually the students are kind of actually really engaged in the process of actually evaluating this particular text, and then so show the process of learning from each other, and also knowing how to express that process and change. So that's an actually very rough way of showing that actually the students seem to be very engaged and motivated in this process, and then also whether the students actually have certain language actually developed as a result of this actually writing practice. I mean, this is an actually premise of the communicative approach. You don't have to teach the language like as an object. The learner's language will develop as a byproduct of actually engaging in the social interaction, and I think that's actually what is actually evidenced in this small data set. So I have actually three measures of three different aspects of actually it's not really linguistic knowledge, it's more of actually proficiency measurement, fluency, grammatical complexity, and lexical diversity. One reviewer of the paper that I actually submitted to a journal said that why is there no accuracy? Accuracy, I had actually, so to find these measures, and I looked at the previous kind of research about these particular measures, and there's none about Korean, and there's a lot of research about this in like actually about English language. So there's like just tons of work. So my job was actually to apply some of the measures to Korean, and so I kind of actually figured out, I feel actually fairly confident about this, the measure I decided to adopt about fluency, grammatical complexity, and lexical diversity, but accuracy is really, really sticking point, because you could have an actually global measure of accuracy, or you could have an actually very targeted measure of accuracy, like a verb accuracy or something like that. And so which one do you choose? So because I don't have any actually grammatical like an objective in this course, so I cannot use that actually local measure of grammatical accuracy. There's no point of doing it. It's not relevant. But for the global measure, there are actually global measures have actually, there's a quantity of errors, and there's different levels of errors, and also different ways of counting errors. So so I actually Couldn't decide. So I just like, somebody else has to do it. Let me stop here. Fluency measure is the T-unit length. So there are tens of measures about actually fluency, but this is a very well tested measure in English language and some European languages. So this is what I adopted. But I don't want to actually bore you with the details about this. So word per T unit. T unit is different from sentence and also different from clause. So how do you define T unit is one thing, and then also how do you define the word? And so for this, I counted morphemes in Korean, actually, for example. And then T unit complex ratio is actually the ratio of clauses per T unit. T unit isn't actually, just to give you briefly if you're not familiar with it, T unit isn't like actually independent clause and is along with the dependent clauses that are hung to that independent clause. Yeah. So subordinate clause, so it's an actually combination of the main clause and subordinate clause. That's T unit. So sentence in English is actually started from like a capital letter to the period. Sentence could be 1 T unit length, it could be T2 units. Yeah, same in the Korean too. So T unit is like is the more actually reliable measure of the fluency, and because there are a lot of actually overflowing sentences like going on and on. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that the writer is fluent. And grammatical complexity is so for Korean, it was very hard to actually define what's clause. So that's something I have to actually go into real detail, but it's not relevant to you. And also lexical diversity is also there are a lot of it. It's basically word type and word token ratio. But that simple measure is very inaccurate, because if you have a longer text, then the writer is actually at disadvantage. You have like such a long text, so word tokens are so many, but word types are limited. So because of that, this is an actually adjusted measure of actually, so that wouldn't happen. Adjusted measure of actually of lexical diversity, and this is what I adopted. Okay. And this is more detailed to give you the Korean examples. So group means of fluency. Yeah. So from is the first semester and the fluency. So student actually produce longer T units at time 2 at time 5 as opposed to time 2. So. And then also, it's actually the increase is kind of actually quite different. So there was and then what about individually? So I looked at actually 5 students who did it like over the entire year. So these are actually so 2 heritage students are like heritage student D and E. So this is a heritage students. One heritage student here, and another heritage student is this one here. Can you see? Yeah. So D is actually there's so many. You can see that there's like a real peak and a going down and then going up again. So there's a lot of actually that movement like this. So but so if you flatten it out, then it's actually, if you average out, there's like a slight incline there. And then also E is is going up, but then it kind of actually went down at the last minute. So maybe you can actually average out, and incline would be like that. So I would interpret it as a general increase. And for non-heritage learners increase actually is somewhat actually less kind of actually erratically varied. There's actually steady increase in the fluency in their writing. Yeah. And then in terms of the grammatical complexity, again, there is an actually good showing of an improvement in the group data, and then individually here. Can you see heritage student does actually somewhat gray line difficult to see. And it's not gray, is it? Yeah, this is a heritage student. Here, one heritage student, and another one here. Oh, and then just to give you a note, actually, a student D is her proficiency, although she was heritage, her proficiency was very low. She was very low. And then E, this student is probably one of the most proficient speaker in the class. So there's a big gap, but there's a slight increase. But they are going down at the like actually week 10 in the time 10. So but the other non-heritage student increased, but there's a slight actually going downward. And I actually faulted to the end of the semester or something. But their end point is actually unmistakably higher than their starting point in general. Yeah. And also this is a lexical diversity. Yeah. And there's individual data. Yeah. So going ups and downs. And this is actually by individual students showing all of the actually measures. So this is a non-heritage student. Who is this? Let me just, this is an MA student, who a mature student, whose actually writing is very difficult to read because it's a really painstaking process for him. I can see that actually how much time he has to put into to actually look up, but it has become more fluent towards the end, and then also there's an actually I think for him, I think that increase in fluency is a real progress in his writing ability. And then the next one is let me see who's this. This is non-heritage student who was the undergraduate student, and he was also very hardworking, meticulous student, and the readability of his text was very hard because you know that actually some students try to put together very complex thought and then relying on the dictionary and so but he has really interesting ideas to express. But again, his fluency is increased. Actually, that I think that tells something. And this non-heritage student, this is actually by far the most actually proficient non-heritage student in their class. She was very fluent, and but her fluency was increased throughout. At the end of the year, and also grammatical complexity was going up a little bit, and then stayed, and then also lexical complexity, slightly higher. And this is the non-heritage student. This is the heritage student. This is the relatively lower proficiency heritage learner, and so her fluency actually was very changeable, but I'd like to interpret a generally upward movement and other measures too. And then this is the very proficient student who was actually. You don't see the comparison with others. I mean, the starting point of his fluency was way high for him. And then my last part of the analysis is actually whether their writing actually has become better. I mean, this is actually, as you said, it's a subjective judgment. So whether they developed as a writer, writer in Korean language. These are students actually who are academically very, very strong in English. Duke students are actually generally very, very motivated, and they work hard, and their academic success is really important to them. And so this isn't actually about whether they will achieve the same thing in Korean is a different matter. So let's see. So in terms of content elaboration. took out some excerpts that actually shows different kind of actually rhetorical moves. So here, the first one is actually what it says actually. So a lot of students actually have this actually, when they have the made an evaluative mark, they say that actually something is strange, something is funny. And there is no more actually supporting details. Yeah, something strange, that part, oh, that's a little odd. And then, but by the time and time 5, actually, they find it a little odd because of these reasons. And they haven't actually, they provide a lot of details. There's a significant content elaboration. And same here too. So it's like, oh, that was so funny. But very similar kind of actually observation about another movie. And this is a very funny scene. It's because, and then it has an actually long kind of actually explanation about his observation. Yeah. So that's an actually generally content development. I see noticeable actually some progress in many student writing. And also, as I mentioned earlier, register difference in Korean. Actually, in Korean, speech style sentence ending is actually should be the blue one. Ta is then actually what you use in the objective writing, and then the red one and the yellow one is basically oral speech ending. It's an interactive speech ending. The long one, as you can imagine, is more formal, and the short one is actually less formal. It's an informal one. So, 씁니다 is a very formal ending, and then it's appropriate, and sometimes in writing too. But it's actually when you actually engage the reader personally, then you use this form. But it's primarily spoken style speech ender. In yo too, this is like a polite but still a little more informal form. And then whereas in writing, adult writers actually end their writing with the ta. So I had actually at the beginning, I mean, I gave it as an actual instruction. So when you write in Korean, so in this kind of writing, ta is the ending you use. So students, a lot of students follow, and then also in the earlier, actually in the second year, there's actually long kind of actually unit about actually the speech and speech style differences and what they use in what occasion, but it doesn't actually seem to stick, particularly with the heritage learners who are so used to the orality mode, so they don't feel comfortable using ta. Somehow they feel that that's a kind of actually doesn't feel right. So although I give the instruction, it's actually the non-heritage student writers doesn't have any problem. I think it's because they don't develop any actually some of the actually emotional or some affective like stance with this. But heritage students actually, so some students actually really, I actually write it down every time because it's a very noticeable kind of feature of like a non-adult like writing. So, but this student actually, but still 합니다, and then also, that's interesting, but also switch to oyo is like very odd too, yeah. So it's like, so it's like actually, the child self of this writer is coming up. That's how I feel. And then just by time 4, and actually, so first sentence, he uses ta. And he had made a conscious effort. And then as he writes and more involved in the content, going into 씁니다. But then time 6, they did it actually consistently.
And
yeah.
You said every time you have their writing, you actually give explicit instruction not to use this form.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then another student too. So this particular 2 students actually took a long time. Other students actually switched somewhere in the middle, but these students actually took all the way to the end of the semester until they actually used this speech style ending. So this gradual shift to the plain style suggests that students who has limited experience with writing needs time to get accustomed to the convention of the plain style in writing, and that experience writing in the public forum has been actually helpful and critical to this adoption. Finally, yeah, I was very happy. And then also, I would say actually this is like an authorial stance, some kind of authoritative actually stance that they adopted as the towards the end of the writing too. So when they make an evaluative remark, it was actually started with a very personal and experiential framing into more analytical, and so this person is actually, so you see that actually I'm just actually, oh, this is how I feel. So in the way that actually, oh, this is what the movie is saying, this is what the director is intending to do. So in the right it's actually I think da-di-da-di-da, and so I think da-di-da-di-da. But time 6, what this movie says is da-da-da-da-da. So it's a very different kind of actually framing. And the same here with another student. So another way of it is actually I think, that when they do the actually opinion, it's I think, or it was good, like I liked it. So it was good, and this part was good, and I find this part actually very interesting. And but then the towards the end it says actually, oh, this movie is the movie that actually expresses da-di-da-di-dan. And then also through this movie, the director invites the viewer. I was very impressed. Yeah. And then, so these are the heritage students, actually. This all like a very noticeable stylistic kind of actually change here. And then the last one is about actually, it's the same thing. So I think there was more different, there are more similarities than the differences. And I think it's because of that. And then, but time 6, the movie emphasizes the importance of something. This movie seems to show that. So when they were actually making the, like they were describing the theme or the main point, yeah. So just the summary that, so I thought that actually this, somewhat the examination of the data seems to show that this mode of actually writing in class has a very good, has a positive impact on the student motivation and in engagement. And there's a very solid evidence of student linguistic proficiency progress. And thirdly, they seem to be developing as a more confident writer. Yeah. So, closing thought. So, yeah. So I think that actually for writing instruction, so meaning focused task with substantial content seems to be very important concern for the design of writing component or writing course, and also how peer interlocutors can play a really central role in the language and the literacy development. And then for future directions, this is just one typical writing task, the movie commentary, movie review, but there are how the other writing tasks can be actually retooled or redesigned to align better with a more of actually person and context-based approach to writing. And also how do we actually make the feedback and evaluation more effective to help and support the kind of the direction and the development we are hoping for. And also, my analysis about actually the writing development is very basic, very rudimentary, so more fine-grained analysis of the self-presentation and alignment with others in the writing will be very helpful. Yeah. So thank you for your attention. Yeah.